The Switch has a great library of games, and a lot of them that some people do have a bit of a love-hate relationship with is the massive number of ports to the system. And personally, I love them. I think there are a lot of games that are now flourishing on the Switch that did not do as well in other systems, and the thing is, I think there's even more that could benefit from the change. So let's talk about 5 games that need to be on the Switch. First, let's get one big guy out of the way, and actually one that from this list has a pretty decent chance of really happening, and that's Fortnite. If there's one genre Nintendo hasn't been particularly well known for the past few years, it's shooters, with the exception of Splatoon. And if there's any major game out there right now that I think would make a great move, it's Fortnite. I mean, never mind that it's already this huge, gigantic success and it's one of the most watched games on Twitch. Just look at the art style, look at the kind of fun and playfulness behind it that really fits the Switch's dynamic. Now, truth be told, if you want to be some kind of pro player at it, yeah, playing it in portable probably isn't the most optimal experience, but the idea that you could just play it on the go when you want as long as you have access to Wi-Fi is super freaking awesome to me. Now, the reason why this is one of the ones more likely to happen on this list is that while there is no official announcement just yet, people from Epic Games have been asked before whether or not they'd be interested in doing it in Switch, and the answer was yes. So, interviews, not solid answers, but it's a good sign. Next up, let's talk fighting games. Now, there's a couple already that have made their way to the Switch, and there is one particular Nintendo one that we've probably raved enough about needing a new one. We'll move on. But one game that I think would make a great move as well is the recent success of Dragon Ball FighterZ. Dragon Ball FighterZ is a great example of something where you take a much beloved franchise and figure out the right game mechanics that fit the feel of it perfectly. And I think it's something that would make a really great fit on Switch. I mean, in general, I think the Switch is actually just a great choice for fighting games in general because of the ability to use, separate Joy-Cons to share with a friend, and all of a sudden you're doing 2 players on this little tiny thing on a tabletop. Now, the reason why there is some hope for this one is that we do have other Dragon Ball fighting games on the Switch already. Xenoverse 2 did get released, so while it didn't get a same-time launch as Xbox and PlayStation, I don't think it's entirely out of the question. So, Bandai Namco, make it happen. Next up, let's take a little bit of a break from some of the heavy-hitter big titles and actually talk about something that's a little more of an indie success that really would make a great fit on the Switch, and that's A Hat in Time. Now, if you haven't seen this game before, A Hat in Time was a Kickstarted game that the entire goal was to kind of bring back the 3D platformer elements that came from the N64 and GameCube era, and it's really bizarre that a game that is based on this styling, and honestly did it better than Yooka-Laylee did, hasn't made its way to the Switch yet. Now, unlike the first two on the list where there's some hope, this one's looking a little more dreary. Since it was a Kickstarter game, they only had plans for certain systems. They did talk about maybe doing something for the Wii U, but then obviously the Wii U crashed and burned. So there's hopes that maybe it could come to Switch, but the devs have been pretty against the idea, as they've even tested out doing it themselves and don't really want to do it. So unless anyone else steps in to offer doing the port job or Nintendo wants to give a little assistance, this one's looking like it's not gonna happen, which is really sad. Next, we've talked shooters, fighters, platformers, but now it's time for my favorite genre, RPGs, and one that I think really should go to the Switch is Persona 5. Now, yes, the Persona series has been, for the most part, basically entirely on Sony systems. They've had a couple spin-off games that have made their way to Nintendo, but the overall franchise, Shin Megami Tensei, is actually on a lot of Nintendo systems. In fact, the next mainline one, SMT5, is a Switch exclusive. So while there hasn't really been any precedence for this series to exist on Nintendo series, it is by no means out of the question. Now, on the other hand, this is a question that I am not the first one to ask. There are a lot of people that demanded this, so much so that actual executives from Sega and Atlas have made the announcement, no, we're not doing it, please stop asking. To which I say, please keep asking, let's make it happen, guys. And then we have a game whose series has recently been mostly just a Nintendo exclusive, but its latest entry moved back to an older platform, and that's Monster Hunter World. The Monster Hunter franchise is one that did find its origins on a Sony system, but for almost the last decade, they've really been dedicated to Nintendo, with releases on the Wii, the 3DS, and even the Switch, at least in Japan, with Monster Hunter Double Cross. But the latest entry, Monster Hunter World, is right now, at least, exclusive to Xbox One, PS4, and later this year, PC. Now, part of the reason for this is that Monster Hunter World is a considerably better looking game, so much so that it'd be a bit tougher for the Switch to properly run. And that's been the main worry on Capcom's side, that, well, the Switch does draw a different audience than the Xbox One and PS4, and World wasn't really designed for that. But there are cries for people that want this on the Switch, because having this available as a handheld would be great. In fact, demand for this idea has been so high that a third-party company, Iron Galaxy Studios, the company that actually handled the porting for Skyrim to the Switch, tweeted out to Capcom, hey, we'd be willing to try and do this for you, which isn't any kind of official news that that's something that's gonna happen, but it would be really cool if it did.